Welcome to the Lancaster School District Active Supervision Training for school district employees. Although active supervision can be used in any school setting, this training will focus on areas such as the playground or cafeteria where a large number of students will be supervised. What is active supervision? Active supervision is a proactive approach used in school settings to monitor a large area in order to ensure safety and reduce problem behaviors from occurring. It is most commonly used in non-classroom settings such as the cafeteria or playground, since these types of settings often have less adult direction and supervision. By scanning and moving around the area while interacting with the students, staff members support and reinforce appropriate behavior and correct inappropriate behavior. Active supervision contains several features. These features include movement, scanning, positive contact, positive reinforcement, instructional responses, immediate and contingent delivery of aversive consequences, and team-directed data-based decision-making and intervention implementation. Each of these features will be covered in greater detail. Constant movement tends to give students the impression you are everywhere. Movement should be random and unpatterned. Movement should target known problem areas, activities, as well as individuals. Scanning involves maintaining constant visual movement. It's important to look at the students' behaviors and not just the games that they are playing or that the clothes they are wearing are in dress code. It's important to identify and pay attention to behaviors that precede misbehavior. Things such as games breaking up for no reason, angry gestures, scared looks, or someone running away from a group. Those actions all indicate that misbehavior may be occurring. While looking for behavior is just as important, it's also important to listen for behavior. Listening for angry voices, whining, panicked voices, or authoritative commands coming from students all indicate that misbehavior may be occurring. It's also important to focus on as many different areas as you can. At the beginning, this will be a challenge. However, with practice, you will be able to scan all areas around you. It's also important to recognize potential trouble spots and scan them often. Common trouble spots include the restrooms, the basketball courts, and sometimes the soccer field. So it will be important to monitor them very carefully and frequently. It's also important while scanning to minimize the time spent dealing with problems. If you are intervening with a student, it is important to follow the 2-minute rule. If the behavior takes more than 2 minutes to address, then it's time to pass it along to the next person, most likely your campus supervisor, to be handled. Your attention should focus on the students you are monitoring. Another feature of active supervision is positive contact. Positive contact is not the same as positive reinforcement. The goal when using positive contact is to build the relationships with the students you are supervising. In addition, positive contact is a proactive strategy that is not contingent on student behavior. When delivering positive contact, you should use a friendly, helpful, and open demeanor and use it in a high rate of delivery. An example of positive contact is greeting students in the morning as they enter campus, discussing the events of the previous weekend, or just mentioning how much you like what the student is wearing. Positive reinforcement is an integral part of your school's PBIS system and is also a component of active supervision. The goal when using positive reinforcement is to change student behavior by using praise and rewards to encourage appropriate behavior. Positive reinforcement should be contingent on student behavior rather than on positive contact, such as complimenting a student's shirt or because it's their birthday. Reinforcers such as praise or your school's tickets should be immediately provided to the student once an appropriate behavior has been demonstrated. It is critical that students understand why they are receiving the tickets. Therefore, you must specifically name the behavior they demonstrated because that is key to changing behavior. Other students in the area may witness the reward being given and will be more likely to demonstrate the same appropriate behavior as well. In addition, reinforcers must be used consistently in order to encourage appropriate behavior. Positive reinforcement is less effective when it is used efficiently at the beginning and quickly forgotten about, or used intermittently. Reinforcers should be delivered at a high rate, especially when a child is learning a new appropriate behavior. It is also important to note that reinforcers should only be given one at a time. By providing multiple tickets and rewards for a single demonstrated behavior, that devalues the PBIS system. The following example demonstrates positive reinforcement. Katie picked up a piece of trash on the playground and put it in the trash can. A nearby supervision aide noticed Katie's action and immediately handed her a ticket. She thanked Katie for being responsible and placing the trash in the trash can. It goes without saying that children are in school to learn. What is less understood is that children are also learning how to behave in a variety of situations. Because children are also learning how to behave, they will make mistakes. An instructional response is the best way to handle these mistakes when they happen. Instructional responses should be delivered immediately and be contingent on the inappropriate behavior demonstrated. When providing an instructional response to a child, it is important to use a non-personal, calm tone of voice. Remember, the child's behavior is not personal toward you. Therefore, that calm tone of voice will be your greatest asset when providing behavioral instruction. Remember that instructional responses must be about the behavior of the child and not about personality traits or characteristics. Instructional responses also should be consistent across staff. In other words, if students are not allowed to run on the blacktop, then all supervision aides will correct that behavior, not just the ones that choose to enforce the rule. A systematic approach for instructional responses includes pre-correction, correction, modeling, practicing, testing, and reteaching the appropriate behaviors. When you pre-correct, you are reminding and prompting students about the expected appropriate behavior before they engage in inappropriate behavior, especially when you know that particular child is learning something new. By prompting and reminding students of the rules before they make a mistake, there is less chance of them engaging in inappropriate behavior. However, if the student does engage in inappropriate behavior, correcting the behavior is very important. Correction involves defining the behavior that the students are expected to demonstrate. Correction must be followed by modeling. Students learn behavior by doing. So when you demonstrate how to behave, they have a concrete example of what behaviors are acceptable. After modeling, the students should practice the expected behavior by showing you how to do it. Remind them that the next time you see them, they should be demonstrating the behavior. And when they do the next time, acknowledge them for following the expected behaviors and reward them. Some students, after testing, will require reteaching. This is normal. It takes some students longer than others to learn how to do something. Behavior is no exception. Your instructional responses, patience, and understanding will eventually pay off with a stronger relationship with the child. After attempting an instructional response multiple times for the same behavior, it may be necessary to deliver a consequence for the inappropriate behavior. It is important to understand that a consequence is not necessarily a punishment. A consequence is designed to change behavior. Removing a privilege such as recess time is not always the best method for changing behavior. It is critical that a businesslike demeanor with a non-argumentative and non-judgmental tone be used when delivering the consequence to the child. Remember, the student's behavior is not personal, so it is critical not to argue with the student about the inappropriate behavior. This is how power struggles occur. If your goal is to win a power struggle, then you have already lost the battle. It is also critical that the consequence is consistent and fair. In other words, every student would receive a consequence for engaging in the same inappropriate behavior, and the consequence matches the level of severity of the inappropriate behavior. It is an inappropriate consequence to deny a child recess for a week for running across the blacktop. A more appropriate consequence would be to have them go back to where they started and walk. The majority of the time, children run across the blacktop to be the first to access a choice activity or piece of equipment. By making them go back and demonstrate the appropriate behavior, they have already lost out on the opportunity to engage in that preferred activity. The process for delivering a consequence is as follows. Step 1. Take the student aside from his or her peers. This enables you to discuss the inappropriate behavior with the child privately. When students have an audience, they will try to save face in front of their friends and may escalate, becoming defiant or disrespectful. By removing the audience, you are now free to engage with the child one-on-one. Most supervision aides and campus supervisors report that once the audience is removed, even the most challenging child is more respectful. Step 2. Review what you saw with the student. It is important at this point not to be argumentative and to remain calm, stating the fact of what you saw rather than as a question. I saw you run across the blacktop. Step 3. Ask the student to state the expected behavior. If they can't or won't, then tell them the expected behavior. A student's refusal to answer does not necessarily indicate defiance. Sometimes they truly do not know the answer. Avoid a power struggle and tell it to them. Step 4. Give the student choices for correcting the problem behavior. In the blacktop example, you can give the student the choice to go back and walk across the blacktop, or they can sit on the bench for 5 minutes. Either way, they will be safer than running across the blacktop, and they will no longer have access to their preferred activity, which is a natural consequence. Step 5. Explain the school prescribed consequence. Many schools have prescribed consequences for certain behaviors. If your school has a consequence that is already in use, explain that consequence to the child. For example, for behaviors that pose a safety hazard, many middle schools assign detention as the school prescribed consequence. It's also a good idea to remind students how to avoid this consequence the next time they are in the same situation. Step 6. Apply the consequence immediately or as soon as possible. Sometimes a consequence cannot be delivered immediately, such as detention being held at a prescribed time during the day. However, it is critical that the consequence be issued immediately, but can be carried out at the next possible opportunity. Keep in mind that any serious consequence, such as detention or suspension, will be issued by the administrator at your school. The consequences that you will likely be given will be the result of less severe behaviors. Again, if you are dealing with a student and cannot solve the problem within the 2-minute rule, it is time to allow someone else to handle the situation. This slide summarizes the process of delivering consequences for inappropriate behavior. Once the problem behavior occurs, the supervision aide defines the problem, gives the student a direction, a correction, or a consequence, depending on the behavior and the severity. If the student is compliant, the staff member should acknowledge cooperation, provide thanks or praise, but do not offer a ticket for demonstrating the appropriate behavior. Because the student is receiving a consequence for his or her behavior, it is inappropriate to provide a reward. If the student is non-compliant, the staff member should redirect the student and give them choices for complying. In the blacktop example, the student was given the choices of walking from their starting point or losing 5 minutes of recess. Allow the student to make the choice. It is acceptable to make one of the choices a positive choice and the other choice more negative in nature. For example, going back and walking across the blacktop is a positive consequence, while losing 5 minutes of recess is a negative consequence. Team-directed data-based decision-making is an important aspect of active supervision. Changes in procedures and processes on the playground or in the cafeteria may be the result of examining your school's behavioral data. The school-wide information system, also known as SWIS, is used to collect data about student behavior by location, time of day of the week, motivation of the behavior, such as peer attention or task avoidance, and many other factors. This data is used by the PBIS team to make decisions for improving student behavior across all settings of the school. It is important that safety teams are aware of the data being collected on playgrounds and cafeterias, since this is your domain of supervision. If you are interested in looking at cafeteria and playground behavioral data to inform your decisions with your safety team, please talk to your administrator who will be able to provide this data for you. Use the data to change procedures to improve student behavior. For example, if you notice a problem in the 5th grade girls' restroom being left in poor condition after lunch, your team could develop a strategy for preventing this problem. Be sure to involve your administrator in any solutions your team creates. Thank you for taking the time to learn about active supervision. Your job is integral to helping students succeed and learn. Helping them to learn how to behave appropriately is one of the most important and rewarding aspects of working with kids. Although your job is not easy, it is worth it. Thanks for all you do for our children. Click Next to go to the quiz. Please click on the link to go to the quiz that accompanies this course.